Cheers! Welcome back to a new video. Today, we're talking about One Piece TCG. Yeah, I'm trying to make more content about this game because I've been playing it a lot recently and I've been really enjoying it. So, we got an RG Luffy matchup chart. So, RG Luffy's a leader where, for basically, when he has a Dawn on him, you can tap up to 5 Dawn during your opponent's turn to block 2k on attack. So, RG Luffy's a very defensive deck. He's red and green as well, so you have access to a lot of some of the greatest green staples in the game, which are pretty meta right now. I would say they kind of hurt like most of the top decks right now. So RG Luffy has a really good matchup spread, I would say. But yeah, pretty much, I think RG Luffy is actually a really good leader in this format currently in OP15. I think this is going to change in OP16 when the new set comes out in a couple of weeks. But as of right now, I think RG Luffy is a very solid top 10 deck. This deck is very good. Again, you have access to great green cards. You have some of the strong red cards in the format that some decks just can't really play around. And then you have such great micro management of all your resources and stuff. And it's a very fun deck, and I've been really enjoying it. So here's my tier list of what I think this deck beats. So also too, I only have relevant decks. I didn't want to put a bunch of none of these decks are relevant. Like, you might play them at local, sure. Like, that's just One Piece. It's going to happen. But, like, you're not going to lose. RG Luffy is kind of like a barrier. Like, he's not going to lose to... I don't think he's... Genuinely, I can't see him losing to any of these decks. He has, like, a barrier into entry into very random decks. Like, he's not going to lose a rogue matches just because he can protect all of his guys. You have so much removal by attacking. You have double attack. You have blocking. You have freezing. You just do good into rogue, so... None of these are worth mentioning. Like, dude, I'm not going to put green Jibba. Are you crazy? So, I didn't even bother mentioning any rogue deck. We'll start with the winnings. So, pretty much, anything in winning is a deck that just doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't snowball too crazy, and it also doesn't have a good card economy. So, pretty much, Luffy's just going to outgrind these decks with the resources he's already given. The power of RG Luffy is you have a very reasonable hand for the start of the game. Once you start committing bodies and you start committing events to freeze stuff and to deal with certain bodies, you start to lose your hand, and that's when the game can kind of struggle, which is why you have to outmanage your opponent's resources. And the fact that you don't have to discard cards from your hand in order to block attacks means you just have a really good... You just manage your resources so well, which pretty much all these decks just can't really do. I think Dawn Creek's probably the best case scenario here, just because all your characters are minus 2k, so all your 5ks just don't really get to attack, which honestly is fine because you don't even want them to be attacking so your opponent can beat over them. One big thing I've been learning as I've been playing Luffy is just sometimes you just don't want to attack. You don't want, if your bodies die, you are probably losing that game, which is why a lot of these leaders down here can do pretty easily. So yeah, you just want to commit. You just want to make sure your bodies don't really die. And having cards like Nico Robin and, of course, Laboon will help with that. But at the end of the day, if you don't really see those cards, it can make some of these matchups hard. But none of these decks play hard removal. None of these decks do really anything that is surprising that RG Luffy can't really deal with. Again, I think Dawn Creek does the best because minus 2k are your guys, makes some of your guys useless. I think Roger does okay because he does spam, pretty much once he hits 10 Dawn, he's just going to be spamming a bunch of 10 drops, which is really good. But by the time he does that, he's already on, no life, and he is prone to DMGs, and of course, the 4-cost Nami on some of the 8 drops. So, I don't know. These are probably the two better suited decks, I would say, of these, but I don't think RG Luffy can lose to any of these decks. None of these decks do anything to RG Luffy. So let's move on to slightly winning. Yeah, we have some relevant decks here. We'll start with Nami. I confidently think Luffy wins this matchup. I have Nami's probably the deck here I have the most experience against, especially in bracket. And I just have such a high win rate. I have not lost to many Namis. Yeah, the deck just doesn't... the deck... In theory, actually, the deck does really well. You have cards like Zeus to deal with a lot of your 5 drops, which Zeus is so good against my deck. Holy crap, I flipping hate it. And then also, too, she becomes a 7 base, which typically a 7 base leader does really well into Luffy because all your guys are either 5s, 7s, or 9s. So a 7 base makes it so that for one card in their hand, your Luffy isn't going to be able to do damage. Your Sanji isn't going to be able to do damage. So I feel like on paper, Nami should just destroy you. She also has a really good card economy. She's healing every turn. She's drawing a lot of cards from being blue. On paper, you'd think this matchup's terrible, but it really isn't. early on, you'll be hitting like 1 or 2 life pretty early, but after that, Nami has a really hard time of swinging in. And most people, I mean, not so now, but especially like a month ago, most people were on the Gekko Moria build, which genuinely wasn't really that good against Luffy. In order for them to pretty much beat you, they would have to high roll. They would have to high roll 2 to 3 Gekko Morias, either from the triggers or from just drawing them. That was kind of how you lost. You don't really care about Robin that much. Healing doesn't really do a whole lot when you have your 7 cost Luffy. Sorry, your 7k Luffy, which has double attack. Nami just doesn't have a good way of dealing with it, other than Edward Newgate, of course, which we'll talk about that, of course, as we move on to some of the other leaders in this list. But yeah, Edward Newgate's pretty much your best way of dealing with a double attack Luffy. And other than that, she doesn't really have a good way of doing it. So if you just swing big, she kind of has to take it. And most of the time they are, because it's a Nami play. They're going to be drawing a lot of cards. They're cool at drawing cards. They have Borsos, they have Gekko Mora ways of healing, so it's fine. But other than if they high roll on that, you don't really care about Robin that much. You can't get rid of her, but she can be frozen by cards like I Know You're Stronger and Luna, so you don't have to care about that. And yeah, pretty much the bodies just aren't strong enough. Perona is really annoying. It can freeze most of your guys, but make it so your Luffy can't attack, which is pretty annoying. But other than that, that only lasts for a turn. So once that happens, you just kind of attack over it, and then cool, your guys can't die now because Nami doesn't have a lot of good removal. So if they're gonna be if you're gonna attack your Usops into it, and then they're gonna make it so your Sanjis and your Luffy's can't attack, which you're kind of fine with because Zeus is your only out for it, and they don't, and you can't Zeus Sanji. Well, you can Zeus Sanji, which you're fine with, but they cannot Zeus Luffy. So Luffy's still sticking on the board. So you have to go through more Gekko Mora stuff to even freeze him. So I just don't really think it's a good matchup for Nami at all. I think it's a really good matchup. All your green events just destroy her. Nami's broken. The only saving grace of the matchup is Edward Newgate, which is definitely an annoying card, but genuinely, the reason I don't think Edward Newgate's that annoying is you can deal with it. Most players are going to hold it for when they actually need to block something. So you can just force swings in early. Like, are they really going to block a swing, early on? No, they're not. And it's crazy, too, because they kind of have to. Because you're going to be playing the DMG game. If I have DMG in my hand, I don't really care about Newgate. I'm going to rest that crap, and then I'm going to go for game. Being a 4-life unit against Luffy is just so hard because you're not dealing a lot of damage to me unless you're yellow, and it's it could just get really hard to get game. Also, too, all my bodies trade so favorably in the matchup. I can't see Nami winning the matchup. I think it's a very Luffy favorite matchup. Next up, we have the blue-yellow Robin. Boa. I actually don't have. This is probably the deck I have the least experience against of everything here. This deck has kind of fallen off ever since the Rayquaza ban, and just the overall hype of her when she came out in the set. But yeah, I don't think this deck really does anything that crazy. I mean, Luffy has a really good yellow matchup. I mean, yeah, you're gonna be losing damage from some Namis and just from generic yellow cards. But beyond that, you don't really care about the healing because you have double attack and you just swarm the board with a bunch of bodies. And again, similar to Nami, she's just not gonna be able to swing for lethal at all. And Boas don't, unless I'm mistaken, Boa doesn't really play a lot of high cost, other than, of course, the one that heals and you deal damage. That's probably the Edward Newgate equivalent of this deck that is going to be annoying to deal with. But at the end of the day, that's all you're going to be losing your life to. She's not going to be swinging at you. There's not going to be an opportunity for her to do that. All the other cards just lose to all your green cards, so I really just can't see how she loses this matchup other than getting a good card economy. I think the power of Luffy is he does really well in the yellow and blue decks, and I think he struggles against purple and green decks, and a little bit to black decks at certain points just because of the cost manipulation, you just can't freeze things. But I think generally we're just gonna beat most yellow decks. Unless they have some kind of interesting mechanic that makes it hard for us to kind of go after the board and kill some things. Which is kind of what we got here. We got Rosinante. Yeah, Rosinante is a very interesting deck for this matchup. I have not the most experience against it, but from the games I do play against it, it's kind of the purple cards I'm kind of losing to. Yeah, the purple cards are really good against Luffy. Gamma Knife, the purple Anel event that freezes things. These cards are going to be a lot scarier than the actual yellow cards in the Rosinante matchup. And again, I don't have the most experience against it, but unless I get high rolled, I don't really think it's going to be doing anything crazy. The only generic yellow card they really play is Rosinante, which, sorry, is not Rosinante, is Borsalino, which I'm not really that scared of. I mean, it's annoying to deal with, but it just kind of prolongs the inevitable. He's a blocker, he can be rest, he can be frozen, he doesn't really do a whole lot. And at the end of the day, he's playing cards for cheaper, and it's kind of hard to kill his guys, so that's the hardest part of the matchup. But at the end of the day, I don't really think he does anything that crazy against. He doesn't summon a lot of bodies. So I don't think it's that good of a matchup. All right, next up we have the structure deck Egghead Luffy. Yeah, this is the Skyline one. This is the Egghead one. Again, this deck doesn't really do a whole lot compared to Luffy. Again, I think we do so great against yellow. The most annoying part about this is just their triggers that they get. But pretty much, as long as you play around their yellow triggers, you don't commit bodies early, you just swing first and then see what they do. You don't really care about this. Like, their triggers aren't really gonna be, you're not really, like, as long as you manage your resources right, you don't really care when they use their triggers to kind of deal with your board. Again, there's nothing really that is gonna be surprising in the matchup, and I don't think it's just that favored. You can just deal with the board very well. Next, again, same thing we got Moria. The Thriller bar cards are decent against Luffy, but once they lose out on the resource loop, it's kind of hard for them to get back. And again, unless you get high rolled on the Gecko Morias, I don't think this deck really does a whole lot against you. And again, being a 6k leader, it doesn't matter. Like, you just get the block. Zoro's an interesting leader. Unfortunately, he is an 8k swing at you, at your leader, at your guys, which just can't die because you're going to have 5 Dawn active. And then he's going to swing your life, which is a little bit annoying, but typically, unless they have another body on board, you're going to be able to block it. Or at the very least, take it and just, gain. But pretty much, again, Zoro has to attack characters first. So, and they're just never going to die. Like, realistically, unless they put all their Dawn on Zoro to kill, like, your Usopp or your Sanji, they're not dying at all. And then you're just going to either block or take the hit at life. So Zoro doesn't really do a whole lot. You're going to get close games, definitely, probably out of all these. And then obviously, you're going to get close games with Nami the most, and then next will probably be Zoro. You're going to go down to 1 life, typically, but I still think it's a very favorable matchup for Luffy. Zoro just has a terrible resource management. You deal with all their Tashigis very easily. It's just it's not a hard matchup at all. Same thing with Blackbeard and Sabo. So yeah. It's pretty annoying in these specifically in these matchups because they're black. Black decks are actually pretty hard to deal with because they at least these two, they gain a lot of cost, so it can be pretty difficult to deal with the bodies. You can't really freeze anything, which is pretty annoying. But what's nice about this deck is, other than Luna, of course, you could just use the I know you're stronger as counter. So like they're not bricks in this matchup. Like you can just use them somewhere else. But pretty much the best part about these decks is just the flipping the dragons. Dragons is such a powerful card. Just being able to play a body from grave. And it is also an AK swing, which is really good against Luffy. Just having big bodies against Luffy is just so good. But again, this leader isn't getting any damage into you early on or late game. You're only scared of Dragon. There's nothing really that Sabo does that you're really scared of. It's a relatively consistent deck, but I just don't think they're out-countering your board, so I don't think this matchup's good at all. And then Blackbeard is in a similar boat. I just can't, like, there's maybe a world you could put him in even, but because you do lose all your on plays, which some of your on plays do give you back Dawn, so you have to play pretty passive early on because you have to make sure you commit to board so you can swing at Blackbeard, but you also don't get Dawn back. But of course, Usopp is broken in this matchup. Usopp's one of the best cards in the deck. I fucking love Usopp, but yeah, Usopp just farms this matchup. I think Zoro farms this matchup as well. He's just not swinging at you. Like, I just think Blackbeard just plays so much from behind. Unless it's a really good Blackbeard player, like even if they are good, bro, they're gonna be bricking so often. Like this deck just doesn't have a hand. Like you're not gonna be dealing with it. He is a 5-life leader, so I guess he's gonna be getting a lot of draws from double attack Luffy, of course. But I don't know. And then especially if you draw again like your anti-removal cards, I don't really think Blackbeard does a whole lot on this matchup. So you can maybe see where he's even, but I just because you do lose all your good on plays like Zoro, Sanji, but I just don't see him at all doing well. So he's in the slightly even. Or sorry, slightly winning. All right, moving on here. We have some of the even decks. Yes, okay. This one might be a little crazy. No, it's not. NL is probably the most popular deck right now, and I think Luffy just has a very decent matchup into it. On paper, we should be losing it. He has a 5k swing every turn, which forces a card from hand, and then he has a 15k swing coming you every turn with the NL. On paper, this matchup's terrible. And then if he draws more NLs, he has other 10ks coming your way. So on paper, the matchup isn't that good, and he has a lot of the good purple cards. However, in my experience, I have a lot of experience against this deck. Again, second probably to Nami. I think we do decent. The purple cards, they have to commit 2 to force your away the Luffy, which of course they're going to be saving their removal for. But you also have other cards like Sanji, you have cards like Zoro, you have cards like Usopp that they at some point have to deal with, which I guess they can with a 10k swing, but we're going to be saving our Dawn resource to block them, so we're going to be losing 1 a turn. They're going to be playing from a turn behind, multiple turns a game. I know you're stronger. Luna frees their entire board because it's a 6 Dawn deck. So, like, we can just freeze whatever we want. Except for Reiju. Reiju is the most annoying part or aspect of the deck. Being a 9 cost is just so hard to deal with. There's flipping no way to get rid of it. And it's a 7k, so like there's no consistent way of dealing with it. Other than Zoro. Zoro is a very good out to that card. So you want to save your Zoros for the Reijus. Other than Reiju, I don't think, like, and the NL, obviously the 10k NL. I really don't think there's a huge thing the deck has over you. Their events, again, the events are pretty good, but they have to commit a lot to deal with your Luffy's. And then again, if you have your anti removal, they're not doing a whole lot, let me tell you. But the deck, again, all the cards go neutral in card advantage. Well, they actually go plus in a sense, but this deck definitely has a really good hand presence in the matchup, which I think compared to other decks, especially blue decks, I think Enel just has so much cards in their hand at some points. But the biggest problem with Enel is the deck just lacks a lot of counter. Most of their events are 1Ks. Only to Enels. They don't give counter to any of your other bodies. So you can actually reasonably swing over their small guys. You can reasonably swing, which again, their small guys aren't really doing a whole lot because they become 6k, which of course you can just block with 1 Dawn. So you don't really have to worry about them. But when their Ragers are swinging, when their Ragers are rested, if they were swinging early, or if they have guys up such as a Senior Pink, you could simply just do 2 or 3k over, and they are not gonna be able to block it. There is just no way, unless they high rolled with a bunch of 2ks in their hand, they're not blocking. And if they do, they're just going to 2ks. You're cool with that. Like, the deck just doesn't really have a whole lot of 2ks to deal with, so you actually can swing not even that big and get some double attacks in, unless they have a blocker up, which of course they do. But again, you can freeze them, you can deal with them. It's actually not that bad. Nami is so good in this matchup. You can rest whatever you want. You get all your Dawn back, and then you can spread some Dawn and just deal with anything. So I think that matchup's even. For all these even matchups, it really depends on who wins the die roll. I think if Enel wins the die roll, it's gonna be a lot harder. But if you win the die roll, I don't think it's that bad. I think it really just depends on how they roll. If they only draw into like 1 or 2 Enels, I think it's actually doable. When they start dropping 3 or 4, it gets very, very hard. But they are bricked up, which means they don't have a lot of ways of dealing with your cards. And again, it's a resource management at the end of the day. They do draw a lot of decent cards, but if you could just deal with the 10 drop NL and the 10k NL, you can just freeze it and you can deal with 1 or 2. So smart NL players will play around Luna. They will play around I Know You're Stronger. But of course, against bad ones, it will be a lot easier to deal with. So I really don't think this matchup is that bad, but it's obviously NL. It's the best deck in the game. I don't think it's not going to be a freebie, but it's not going to be that bad if you play your cards right. Next, we have Lucy. This is another deck I don't have the most experience against. But at the end of the day, this deck does draw a lot of cards. So again, decks that draw a lot of cards, that summon big bodies, just have a very real favorable matchup into RG Luffy. I don't have the most experience against this deck, but other than the card economy, I don't really think it's that good. You trade pretty favorably in all the cards. They have to commit 2 cards every turn to bottom deck, because the one event that bottoms a 6 or less. They can't do it against Sanji unless they commit an extra card. They can't do it against Luffy unless they commit an extra card. And then again, if you have your anti-removal, they're not using any of it. They're using it as discard fodder. So, and then yeah, again, this deck just doesn't also play a lot of blocking capabilities. I mean, they have obviously the Sabo, which is a really good card, but spoiler alert, it's a 7 cost, so you can just freeze it. You can just rest it. Like, it's very easy to deal with. So I don't know. I feel like if you just, as long as you don't brick, because Lucy's very consistent. The reason Lucy's really good is because they're very consistent. But as long as you don't really brick that hard, I don't think this matchup's really that bad. And that's all I kind of have to say about it. Sabo's the most annoying part about it, but who flipping cares? Just flipping get rid of that crap. And then next we have Emu. Yeah, this matchup's even. I mean, there's not much really to it. You don't play any removal in the deck, so you don't really get the downside of the Emu ability. They're all freezable. Luna cooks this deck low key. Yeah, I think Emu actually has a decent resource management loop. But people are also just are kind of tired of the decks. All the good ones have kind of moved on to other decks. But yeah, I don't have much really to say. Emu's one of those decks where it's like, I feel like he goes even against most decks, right? Other than like the top dogs. I think early on you just deal with the board. Sorry, you don't deal with the board. You just provide so much pressure early on that they kind of have to deal with it, and then you just kind of start blocking them early on. So you don't they're not really forcing any cards from your hand, and you're just building so many draws because it takes some time to set up. Next we have Smoker. Smoker's actually has a really good matchup into Luffy. I think it's really hard to deal with Croc. Looping Croc every turn is going to be just stopping two guys from attacking. It's actually very strong. They have ways to deal with Nami. Yeah, I don't have, again, another deck I don't have the most experience against, but from the experience I do have, Croc doesn't seem that bad. But I think at the end of the day, it really just depends on who pulls better, and which again, that's just how even's gonna go, who wins the die roll. But I think if you win the die roll and you pull half decent, I think Croc, you have a decent chance of beating it. Again, the deck is relatively consistent because it has ways of getting to Mihawk, but sorry, not Mihawk, to get a Croc, but... And then, of course, the deck has decent 2K abilities, has the 4K event from Ground Death, but again, it doesn't play a lot of removal, so it can be hard to deal with the bodies. But again, as long as you swarm the board, you don't really lose your bodies early on, I think it's a fine matchup. And, of course, you can freeze some of their low bodies. And then finally, we have Luffy. Again, another match I don't have a lot of experience against. It's not that popular here, because Rayquaza and Borso have a ban, of course. But most of them are going to be playing Borso. Which Borso, again, Borso just, at the end of the day, the way I look at Borso is it just either plays into double attack or it just prolongs the game. That's really all Borso really does. It doesn't really do a whole lot against my deck. I'm going to be dealing with the blocker, or I'm going to be just double attacking, and the draw doesn't really do a whole lot. But yeah, you can't obviously go after the board. They're going to be taking lives, but at the end of the day, who flipping cares? Let them take their flipping life. You're going to be doing a double attack swing at their life anyway, so go after the board. Maybe they flip and let it go, or maybe they just take the life, and you go double attack, and then you just kind of go for lethal. A lot of the yellow cards are actually good against my deck. Like cards like Wiper, just flipping dealing with Nami is just so flipping annoying, or dealing with your Laboons, it's very annoying. But again, it's different from a yellow situation because they have ways of dealing with the board that I'm going for. It's kind of hard to outgrind a yellow deck with that capabilities. But other than that, I don't really see what this deck has over my deck. So yeah. All right, next up we have another yellow deck. We have Yellow and No. So I actually don't have much experience against this deck. I haven't played against this deck since it came out in a couple offsets. That's when I kind of started playing the game, so I have a little bit of knowledge with this deck. But pretty much the only thing this deck really has now is a 6-cost event that flipping KOs anything. That's really good against my deck. But other than that, they don't have a lot of removal other than that and Zeus. I mean, to be fair, both are very good outs to my deck. But other than that, again, as long as you see your anti-removals, they don't do anything. So flipping cares. They're gonna be keeping the Zeus as counter and keeping that crappy event in their hand as discard fodder, which is whatever. This deck is decently hard to deal with. I'm not gonna lie to you. The fact that even with a 3 character board, they can just kind of heal up, and it can be really hard to kill them. And then the deck has a lot of hand presence. They draw a lot of cards every turn. My biggest recommendation for this matchup is try to go after board as much as you can. A good NL player will not let you. And then they're also going to be on the Gekamura cards, which is going to be freezing more guys and stopping attacks. So it is a relatively hard matchup, I think, with both the Gekamura build and just the way NL works, which he gains a life every turn when he goes to 0. It is, and then double attack just isn't really that good against those kind of decks because he's gonna be at 1 life for the majority of the games. Double attack doesn't really get the whole value. Yeah, it's a pretty difficult matchup, I'd say. If they play their cards right and don't play hard into Luna, play hard into 9, I know you're stronger, it could definitely be hard, but don't go for life early on because they're just gonna take it. At the end of the day, this deck is very hard to kill. So if you go after life, like obviously at some point they're gonna have to get to 2 life or 1 life. But it's like they're going to be drawing a lot of cards in their presence, and they're going to be drawing the cards that heal. So I think the best thing to do is kind of wait a couple turns before you start attacking at their life. Then you start attacking, and then you also deal with the board at the same time. I think that's the best thing to do. Other than that, the deck doesn't really do a whole lot early on. So just build your board and just build a presence, and just try to gain as much cards as possible. Next we have Mihawk. I don't think the matchup's good at all. Green just does well against green usually. And the difference here is Mihawk plays a lot of high costs. So things like the Mihawk are flipping broken because it could just stop. It kind of summon a Croc in a way, except with the difference is it's just hard to deal with the bodies. And of course, you have other green cards that deal with your green cards. You have to play around all other events because otherwise, all your guys play into the I Know You're Stronger, the Lunas. So you have to play around all of them. Even Zora plays into them. So literally, all your bodies play into them. So you have to flipping respect it. They have a lot of high cost. They have the Shanks, which minuses everything. They can rest things. Like, this deck definitely has a decent way of dealing with your board. and they just have a lot of counter too. This deck plays flipping a lot of counters, so a deck just having a lot of decent counter makes it a lot harder to deal with. So I think Mihawk actually has a very good matchup into RG Luffy. Next we have Dofi. I have very limited games against this deck. But the fact that it can basically your double attack doesn't really do anything. It just redirects the attack, which is why I think Blackbeard the next set is gonna be very hard for Luffy. Even for it being a yellow deck, it's just gonna be hard because like they could just deal with the double attack with their leader ability. Yeah, purple just has a lot of good generic purple events that kind of deal with your board pretty easily. Again, it is 2 cards to deal with your Luffy, but if it's not Luffy, they can deal with your Sanjis, they can deal with your Usops, they can deal with your Zoros, they can just deal with your other cards pretty easily with the events. They also have, again, the Maharagas, the one lightning storm that freezes things. So the events are the scariest part about this matchup, and the fact that double attack doesn't really do a whole lot against him, and he's a 5-life unit, 5-life leader. So I think just overall Dofi just kind of snowballs pretty hard. Obviously, if you and then of course they have the 10 drop, which stops your whole board, and it's a hard card to get rid of because it's a 10 drop. I think the best thing you have to do in this matchup is just you kind of have to play the long game, but you don't want to because you don't get an attack every turn. Kind of similar to Bonnie, which we'll get into, which honestly I probably want to do this instead. But yeah, I think the matchup's not the best. But if you're better than if you're better than them and you just manage your resources better, you can probably do it. But I think it's slightly losing. Similar to Bonnie. But again, leaders that can deal with the swinging from your double attacks and your whole board, it just makes it a lot harder. Bonnie can just rest any of your guys, so even if you try to like do some swingings and stuff, you're gonna be losing bodies at some point. You're gonna be losing resources, and you have to play cards. Otherwise, you're not gonna be gaining your enough Dawn every turn. You're not gonna be gaining enough board presence, which just kind of plays inherently into Bonnie being able to rest your cards, freeze cards, etc., etc. Green just does pretty well against my cards because none of my guys are 8 costs except for the 10 drop Shanks if you play it, or the 9 cost Zoro, which no one's really playing anymore. But other than that, all your cards play in a green card, so it's a very annoying matchup to deal with. And then just being able to rest your cards means like early on it's actually fine because you can just swing with your Luffy first and then swing your leader afterwards, which is 2 swings, which is enough cards from their hand. Maybe it makes it not that bad, but then again, just having the green events, and if Bonnie's a pretty old deck at this point. If they're a good Bonnie player, it's gonna be very difficult to deal with. Same with the Emu. I don't know. On paper, I just don't really think we do well in this matchup. And then finally, we have Kobe. I actually have a lot of experience against Kobe. I think Kobe does very well in this deck. All Kobe does is minus, of course, your power, and then attack over. Attacking active is very strong. It basically makes it so that if you don't attack. Because again, in some matchups, you don't want to attack with your bodies just so that they can't be swung over. But against Kobe, it doesn't flipping matter. They just swing over anyway. Like, so you just kind of have to attack with your guys. Or even if you do play, or against a decent Kobe player, they're going to be, the turn you play something, they're just going to kill it. They're going to deal with the Usops, they're going to deal with the Sanjis, so you don't actually get a whole lot of Dawn value early on. So I think Kobe's actually a very hard matchup. Especially if they high roll you and they just kind of deal, again, every turn, if they deal with your bodies, you're gonna lose. That's just how the matchup's gonna go. And that deck places a lot of the early game's very good for Kobe. They're gonna be setting up shop very quickly. And then some of their guys are flipping 8Ks like base, which is actually pretty hard to deal with other than with Zoro. So you kind of have to stall with Zoro. Actually, I recommend just try to high roll into Zoros, play them so that you don't take any life, and then you just kind of have to deal with the board. And again, if they don't play, again, a good Kobe player would not play into, I mean, they're going to play an Unreal Stronger. It's kind of hard to play around that. But if a good Kobe player plays around Lunas aren't really doing a whole lot. They're going to be freezing 2 guys usually. But then, I forgot to mention this, there is a 2-cost Doll, which plus 2 costs their board. And it's a blocker. So luckily you can just, the blocker part doesn't really matter. But that ability is so good. So you have to deal with that so early because it basically makes it so there are 7-cost Kobe. Or sorry, I think it's a 6-cost. It doesn't really matter. The Kobe that can't be removed by effect and that draws a card every turn. That card, first off, that card is the best card in the deck. Oh my god, that card is so flipping broken in Kobe. It's so flipping hard to deal with. Like my deck just can't deal with it. If they have Doll up, it's an 8-cost, I think. So like you just flipping can't get rid of it. You can't freeze it. It's just there every turn. So you have to use your Dawn to make sure that. I recommend if they're trying to go for board, obviously you have to block it, which is why the matchup in theory isn't that bad. But in practice, they're just minusing your guy and. They just have such a better board presence than you that they're swinging over everything. So like even if you use all your Dawn to protect your guy, it's gonna die at some point, and then like you either keep the Dawn up so you don't take a life, which I don't recommend because you want again cards against the deck. You want more cards against the deck just to deal with the board. But yeah, it's really not that bad to trade favorably into you. Again, it is multiple cards, which is the nice part about it. But the flipping Kobe just draws so many cards every turn that, and especially if they have two up, it becomes very hard to win the game. And again, all the good generic red cards like Radical Beam are just very good against my deck unless I have the Laboon. And again, if I don't, they're just gonna use it as counter. Also, too, the 8-drop Kobe's very good against my deck. So I think Kobe has a very good matchup into me. And even if I did play removal, they don't care about removal. Their deck doesn't care about removal. It has leader protection. So yeah, I think Kobe does very well against me. It's really a resource management game, which if they're better at resource management and I don't get high rolled, and I do get high rolled, if I don't high roll them, it is a very difficult matchup. And then finally, we're going to get into the losing decks. At some point, I thought Ace was slightly losing. I didn't really think it was that bad. But after playing against it enough and just doing more deck theory, Ace is just good. Ace plays a lot of high bodies, which can deal with your bodies pretty well. As long as you play against a Ace that goes for your board and doesn't really go for your life ever, it could be a very hard deck to deal with. They have Zoro to gain their attack, to gain their lives, and once the leader hits 7k, it becomes very hard for my leader to even deal with them. Luffy needs a Dawn on him to even get the effect off him, to plus 2k from each Dawn. So basically, it makes it so that if their leader is a 6, it's actually not that bad because you're gonna be doing 6. You're gonna be giving your Dawn to Luffy anyway to give 6 attacks. But once they start hitting 7 or 8 attack on their leader, it becomes very difficult to even swing. Which at that point, I'm just going for the board, of course. But Ace has great stats to just deal with your board, as well as he just has such a good card economy. He just draws so many cards, so it's very hard to deal with. And then of course, if he drops more than one Edward Newgate, it becomes impossible to win. But yeah, I highly recommend just going attacking at face as much as you can to get them down to 1 life, and then at some point, hopefully, you can just DMG or you can Sanji your way into dealing with the Edward Newgates, and then you just kind of win from there. And then finally, we have Blue Purple Luffy. Yeah, I haven't played against this deck ever since it kind of fell off with the duo bans, but this deck is very good. They play a lot of high costs, which it's just kind of hard for Luffy to deal with. You don't have a good opportunity to freeze anything. And even past that, it just gains so much. Again, it is a 6k, which you don't really care about because again, Luffy is a 6 attack every turn. But if he plays like the Roger, it just gets really hard to deal with them. You can't really swing at them early. And then they also have a lot of 4Ks and 2Ks to deal with your attacks, like Gum Gum Giant, Gum Gum GG. So yeah, I don't think this matchup is that good. And then once they get their setup rolling, they're drawing effectively 2 cards every turn. It can be pretty hard to deal with the board. They have all these decks have really good card economy or just board presence against Luffy, and they kind of just deal with your whole your attacks or just deal with your main gimmick of the deck with double attack and stuff. So and then finally here I have a bunch of unsures. These are decks that I think are respectable, but I don't have enough information and or experience to really gauge if they're good. On paper, again, I know what all these leaders do, but I think on paper we actually just beat all of them. Bonnie would be the hardest, I think, because Bonnie can become like Bonnie can become a 7k base, which can be pretty difficult to deal with. And then once they start putting down the Luffys, putting down the Zoros, she becomes like a 9, which you're not attacking over. If she becomes a 9, you are not swinging over that. But as long as you stall, which guess what, RG Luffy is very good at stalling, you can just flip and wait for her to go back down and then just start swinging at her. And then she's been taking life early, so and then you have DMG to do with blockers like Borsos. So I really don't think the matchup is that good. But I haven't played against it enough, and they do play a decent amount of high bodies and removal like Ben Beckman and stuff to deal with your board. So maybe it's not that bad, but on paper, if I had to put this, I'd put this in slightly winning. And then yeah, I don't have matchup experience in any of these decks that I would even remotely respect. But at the end of the day, I don't really think we would lose to any of these, just based off me looking at deck lists and me reading the leader, of course. But I don't have much experience to really say. So yes, this is my RG Luffy deck MU chart. I think RG Luffy is a top 10 deck. I think it's a very solid deck in the format. I think next format, it's going to get a lot worse with all the leaders. I think most of the leaders have decent ways of dealing with it, especially BB. BB is going to destroy us. I think that is going to become the hardest matchup in this deck. Just reading all the cards, just reading what it does. It just being slop, yellow slop, is already going to be annoying. But just having ways of dealing with your attacks makes yellow slop... I don't think yellow slop is really that good against RG Luffy, I'm going to be completely honest, but just being able to deal with the attacks off the leader ability, it's just gonna make the matchup even harder. But yeah, again, I love this deck. I've played a lot of it. I've been playing it the most recently. It's such a fun deck. If you guys want to see a deck profile, I'll be more than happy to show you what I've come up with. My list is, it's not that unique, but it's been working. I've had so much success with it, and I've been really enjoying it. But I am ready for the next format. I am ready to play Sengoku. Oh yeah! All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoy. If you want to see more One Piece content, let me know. And yeah, take care, guys.